All right, hello. Welcome back. Go Big Orange Friday on, you guessed it, a Friday morning. Perfect for Ryan Schumpert of Rocky Top Insider. The morning guy is what they call him. Ryan Schumpert, good morning. How are you?
Doing well. I can't complain about a morning when it's 11:15. So it's barely morning. So I ready to roll, as they say.
Ready to roll. I mean, he's freshly retweeted by Bruce Pearl. All things coming up, Ryan Schumpert, this week.
There we go.
We love to see it.
Yeah, good stuff.
Love to see it. Go read his article if you have not already on Memphis versus Tennessee many years ago. Number 1 versus number 2. You can go read it at Rocky Top Insider today. Check it out. Also here in the Preds hat, fresh off a 6-2 win last night against the Sharks with everybody out. Ethan Stone of Saturday Down South. Ethan, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well also. I'll second that. Go read Ryan's article, Memphis, Tennessee. Very good. One of my first memories of Tennessee basketball, I was like 7 or 8. So, awesome night, awesome story. Obviously took a lot of work. As for me, I'm freezing over here at the Stone Manor. It is very cold, and I don't want to turn on the heat because it's like just so loud that you won't be able to hear me. So I just kind of have to live with my current state.
What's the temperature like? If you're saying you're so cold,
it's like probably 65 or so in here. Ooh. But when you just wake up and you get out of bed, and it's like, it's a little chilly.
That is chilly. That's like, it's a dangerous game. It's a lot easier to get up and move around when it's the summer because you're already kind of like hot and you're like, all right, I can just move around. When it's chilly or you wake up and it's cold, you're like bundled up. I'm a weighted blanket guy. And when I have that 30 pounds of just slumber laid over me, like 6:30 a.m., 7, it's hard to just move that off when I'm like, no, this is too cozy. This is
that's my problem. If I was just in the like, I'd be fine. But I've just been sitting in bed doing work and stuff all day, and so I get out and I'm like, oh, it's kind of cold out here. I did not think this through.
I also like Stone Manor. That's when you get your
that's a good one.
When you get your full ranch up there in Carnes or wherever you go, Ethan, I hope you call it the Stone Manor. When Ethan is the biggest journalist in East Tennessee, I hope you have the Stone Manor. When I drive by and I'm like, there it is. Just looks like Count Olaf's house or something from a series of unfortunate events. I hope that's what it is. Well, fellas, we do have some Tennessee Volunteers to talk about here on this program. And you can watch this very program on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/Chase Thomas Podcast today. Like and subscribe this video and all of our videos. Check that out. If you are watching here now, guess what? Full episodes, all the good stuff with Ryan and Ethan at this time every single week. So check that out. You can follow Ryan at rshump 00 or 10. I always get it confused. Is it
00?
00. We got Ethan Stone. Ethan, let's see. What is yours? EK Stone. What is
it? Ethan Stone
23. I knew there was a 23.
Evan Hester, not Michael Jordan.
No, not Michael Jordan. There you go.
The more famous Chicago athlete.
The more famous Chicago 23, of course.
Absolutely. There you go. You can find us Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff as well. Check out all the other good shows across the Blue Wire Pod Network. And if you like this show, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, where you get your podcasts, and leave us a 5-star rating and review and tell us why you prefer Ryan and Ethan over myself on this very program.
We're gonna pause things and put this guy away because he's already in full mode.
That's not how the pause works. The recording's going. Ethan just he just made an executive decision to pause the pod with this is why you want to just jump in here, folks, when you're on youtube.com, because you might have Ethan Stone just getting up here in the middle of the pod, leaving and
did the right thing,
kicking the cat out the building. Like, just no cat love here on this program. Ryan, early thoughts. Marcus Goree, nice commitment picked up by the University of Tennessee over the last week or so. What are your early thoughts on what this means for how the 2024 commitment class is already shaping up for the Vols this spring?
I don't know that I have any, or I'm smart enough to have any broad sweeping generalizations of what it means for the rest of the recruiting class, but I think it's a good get. I mean, it is a guy that Tennessee had been after for a while, and it's always funny. He was a classic. He released his top 5 on Wednesday and then commits on Saturday. I always find that very funny when it happens. But I 3-star right now. I did see, I think Austin Price said something to the extent of he expects him to get a major boost and end up being one of the top players in the state in the 2024 cycle. So it's a good get. It's another in-state guy I wrote about this week where I feel like Tennessee has the foundations for a really good in-state class this year. And, I don't know what his relationship is like with Boo Carter. Obviously, he's Cleveland, not Chattanooga, but pretty close. And Carson Gentle, another Chattanooga guy who Tennessee has committed, and Boo Carter kind of one of Tennessee's top targets for early in the whole class, and he's as well a Chattanooga guy. So the Vols continue to have success there. I don't know if there's any close relationships, but I think that can do nothing but help the Vols there. And look, I think it's we're going to come up later about the position coaches and all that stuff, but defense back, we talked about it last week. Until we see Tennessee be better there with the guys that they have, it's kind of hard to believe that, at least to fully buy in on what they're doing. And they signed a really nice corner class last year, and I think they have, when you combine them with Caleb Beasley, even though he could play safety as well, but the makings of the building blocks of a pretty solid defensive back class, which I think is really important for Tennessee.
Ethan, when you look at just the commit so far, is this about where you expected the Vols to prioritize this spring? Is there a group based on what we saw with the final listing in 2023 versus how they're looking at 2024? It's their position group that you're like, I'm curious if they go here more this spring, or this one needs to be ramped up, and you would like to see a specific position targeted over the next couple months.
Let's see. I don't have it right in front of me. I want to think there's 4 right now, and 3 of them are from the state of Tennessee, which is obviously big. I mean, it's exactly what Ryan was saying. Starting out in the state, and I'll add also Edwin Spillman, I believe, the number 2 player in the state. He's been, pretty much projected to go to Tennessee since like October. He's had like 5 unofficial visits to the Vols, went to the Rocky Top Palooza last, I think, summer before or whatever. And so you got guys like that. That's a lot of, I want to think Spillman is a linebacker, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
A lot of defensive players is what I'm getting at. And so I think currently the only offensive player committed to Tennessee might be Goree, but he's a cornerback. He could play a receiver. I think he's kind of considered an athlete right now, so he could kind of do cornerback, safety, or receiver, any of those. I'd just like to see him start targeting some offensive players. If you look kind of across the country at the really elite, recruiting teams right now, you got Notre Dame, you got Georgia. They're getting, 8 players right now. We're sitting here at 4. That's fine because we're doing well in state. Tennessee's doing well in state, but they don't really have any offensive players, I feel like, on their docket as of right now. Not exactly sure who you go after. I'm not going to act like I'm a general broad knowledge of the commits remaining in the 2024 class, but that's where you'd want to go next. You want to start getting some offensive players to start replacing the obvious talent that Heupel and his staff has currently on the roster.
Yeah, I think you want to see one of the 5-star receivers. Like you want to see at least them get one of them. We'll see where Wingo lines up, and I don't know what happens with my alma mater and Mike Matthews down there in at Parkview.
See, you got what Ryan said with Boo Carter as well. Yeah. He's one of the guys that you could go after for sure.
And he feels like he's probably leaning like it's going to be another Tennessee heavy class, which is good. But for me, the commit that I'm still I want to see is the 5-star offensive lineman. That's just where my head's at. Like, I'm not really worried about receiver. I'm not worried about Jordan Marshall committing or Jarrett Gibson or getting the 4-star quarterback out of Savannah or even just the defensive line and things like that. I think Gardner's going to be fine there. The only thing I still have a question mark in terms of the entirety of this group is still the offensive line. We'll see. They're in the mix for some big ones, but we haven't really seen it yet outside of Sham. So until that kind of flips, I'm pretty nervous about where that's headed because it's just you go up and down this conference and just big boy football, playoff football. It's just you have to get some of these guys. You cannot like Darnell was not your dude. Darnell you developed, and Darnell was really, really strong, but Darnell was a 5-star just guy that you landed. You were just able to plug and play and move him. You don't have any of those guys anymore. And once Cooper's gone at the center spot, I don't know. I just wait and see, cautiously optimistic, but the talent, at least the pedigree, I should say, is going to be a step down, it looks like. And they're going to rely on their development over getting those high-end guys that just walk in as 5 stars and you just know what you have there. So I don't know. We'll see. but that's something where I'm very curious to see how they end up faring this spring and into the summer. In terms of basketball, Ryan, is it a player problem as to why UT's offense has struggled so much, or do you think when you watch this game year in year out with the Rick Barnes system that Barnes actually does deserve a little bit more, not criticism, but just he should have to like kind of address like why he isn't evolving a little bit more in terms of just, hey, Zakai is so much better in the open court. Like maybe we do need to push the pace more, even if it sacrifices our defense because guys are more gassed because we're having to play with more tempo. But you look at it like the half court offense is just so tough to score, and you just have so many guys who are not comfortable in a half court set that you're like, Meshack just feels like a guy who is just a Mike D'Antoni dream, just a great defender who just should camp out in the corner and then drive and draw fouls, which is what he's good at, and crash the boards on threes. And I mean, Sakai, obviously, with his ability, and Toby Awaka, he's in great cardio shape, it seems like. I mean, I don't know. I think that's something that I would like to see more than anything in terms of just offensive philosophy from Barnes, is like sacrificing a little bit of the defense to push tempo more, especially when the shots aren't falling early. Is just like, hey, like Zakai needs to be moving and running, and you just take off and you just need to be push, because even if that sacrifices the defense and even if they're more gas later on, I think you're just going to get better looks, and the Tennessee offense is going to score at a better clip if the tempo was increased. What do you make of that, Ryan?
Well, one, you're not going to see that. That's not going to happen.
No.
They're not going to sacrifice any sort of defense. And while I see your point at this point in the season, maybe I don't necessarily disagree with you on like a broad perspective, but in this point in the season, you talk about games are struggling, they need to do that. Where games are struggling offensively, they need to do that. I think it's really hard to say, all right, we're struggling offensively. Our path to winning these games is let's sacrifice defense to score in transition, something we haven't done well all year.
Yeah.
They're going to double down on what they're good at. Now, whether that's something they should change in the long term, I wouldn't disagree with that. I don't think that's going to ever happen. That's not how Rick Barnes has been his whole coaching career. When you look at the half-court offense, and you talk about adjusting, I think he's done some adjusting and changing of philosophy, and I think you see less of that right now because Josiah, Jordan James, and Julian Phillips are out, and Tennessee can't play small, and then you have to play these two bigs all. They can play Jemai Meshack at the 4 a little bit, but like Rod Clark said earlier this week, he's 6'4". He can do it a little bit, but he can't do it nearly at the level that Phillips or James can. And when you have two big men out there who, one, aren't very consistent, no matter who you choose, haven't been particularly strong offensive threats, and Cam was and Adu, I guess, can shoot a little bit, but they haven't really been seen to give the green light. You're not going to have success there. And, I will say it's a little bit less different again when you've had those guys injured and you've had to play 3 guards, but for a lot of this year, I think Tennessee gets good shots in the half court. They just don't really make a lot of them. And I think that's, to your point, I think that's on the players. And or to your question, I guess you should say that's on the players. And now that obviously all ends up falling back on Barnes because this is who he's recruited. He's recruited defensive-minded guys. And the one thing I will say, and I will put some blame on Barnes for, I think he's too hard on him, over the course of a season. To me, when you see, November, December, even in January, be as hard on the guys as you want. But I think especially when you struggle and you have offensive issues and it's still boom, 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 100% of the time, on them, I think that wears on the guys some. And I think you've seen some Tennessee teams struggle down the stretch. And I think that at least is a reason why. Is that the only reason? No. But I think it's a problem. I think guys can get tentative on offense. I think even Tyreek Key, who they implore to shoot more, we saw it the other night. Tyreek Key turns down a shot clock violation. Lucas Campbell, Rick Barnes' whole bench just screaming at him. Next possession, 6 seconds into the shot clock, he's taking a contested 3 super deep. And it's just, there doesn't seem to be a comfortability with a lot of these offensive players of knowing what they should do, what they need to do, and just being in lockstep with the coaches of what the expectation is out of them, and really a comfortability of finding the rhythm.
Ethan, what do you think in terms of Julian and Triple J? Like when you've watched these games without them, who do you think that Tennessee has missed more, Julian or Triple J?
That's a hard question because I feel like both would be kind of like Ryan was saying. I feel like Tennessee's at its best when it's playing small ball, when you get the least amount of big men in there as you can, and you let just the more talented players do what they want to. And Josiah can obviously play the four very well. I feel like Julian can do 3 or 4 around the same mark. As far as which one is more important right now, I think Josiah is a more complete player, but I think Julian is more important right now simply because he's played more games and the team has gotten used to him being there, if that makes sense. I mean, Josiah's missed like 10, 11 games this year, whatever it is. And Tennessee's beat Kansas, Maryland, USC. I mean, the list goes on without Josiah. And, sure, Tennessee beat Alabama without Julian Phillips and Josiah, may I add. But I feel like what Julian gives, especially from his ability to get to the free throw line, and seeing Tennessee's struggles at that as of late, his ability to get to the free throw line and more importantly, make the free throws, I feel like that's important. I feel like just his physicality, his athleticism, just in general, is something that Tennessee is desperately lacking right now. I'm not really sure Julian is fantastic at creating his own shot, but he at least can do a little bit of that. And nobody on Tennessee's roster currently, nobody currently that's being fielded to the court can really do that right now, at least. I mean, maybe Santi a little bit, but, Tennessee really desperately struggles in that. And then, going back to what Ryan said a little bit earlier, they're getting the open shots. And they just kind of have to start hitting them. So if you got guys like Santi, if you've got guys like Zakai, if they're not hitting their shots, then I feel like things are just going to keep going downhill. Julian, his ability to create, his ability just to be physical inside the paint, get to the free throw line, get some points, not to mention he and Josiah, I feel like are close to on the same level rebounding, especially this year. I feel like Josiah kind of took a step down, but I don't know. I feel like in a lot of ways they're kind of very similar players right now, and Tennessee just misses both of them desperately. If you got to have one back, you got to have Julian, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I hope when they do get to, I mean, I guess I don't think anyone who's just hoping that they're going to be 100%, I just don't think that's happening. That doesn't happen in a basketball season. It's like in football season where it's like, how are they guys 100%? No, like they'll never be 100%. Like Josiah Jordan James is not going to be 100% the rest of the way.
That ship sailed on him a couple months ago. I mean,
yeah.
he can come in and he can contribute, but he's not going to be 100%. I agree.
No. And Julian's gonna be careful. Like he's still looking at a first round pick. Like he's gonna be careful. He's gonna keep that in mind. You're in the back end of the season. Like there's a lot of money to say. Like there's just, I just don't see a scenario where they're 100% the rest of the way. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But I do think what we've learned, Euros got what 3 minutes against Texas A&M, which is a positive development. But I also just think we've talked about this, but you feel bad. But Olivier, I think when you get Triple J and Julian back, I don't think he can be in the rotation. I think you have to do the Ben Simmons thing with Brooklyn, where Jacques Vaughn's like tough decisions had to be made, and Cam Thomas and Ben Simmons were out of the rotation, and we just have to shrink it to 7 to 8 men playoff basketball. I think what we've seen is Tobias and Jonas should be the only fives at all times for Tennessee, and Toby has just been incredible on the boards. He's even a good free throw shooter. It's kind of crazy that I just trust him so much based on the A&M stuff, where I was like, oh, Toby over Euros, over Olivier, over even Santi late. I'm like, put Toby on the line. I'm just all in on Toby. And Ryan's losing his mind. And I'm just like,
I'm not sure I agree with you on this.
Toby Awaka, the world. Because that guy, you give him a challenge in a clutch moment. Like if I had to bet on anyone, it's either him or it's Tyreek Keys, probably my two. Maybe Tyreek Keys, who I could trust the most in a free throw win or go home situation, but it's one of those two.
48% free throw shooter.
I was going to say
Toby Awaka. I'm telling you, he's turned the corner, Ryan.
I mean,
he's turned the corner.
He hit him in his last game. He hit him his last game, sure.
He did. He looked good.
He's
turned the corner.
It was a good sign. Don't get me wrong, it was a good sign. Don't get me wrong, I love Toby Awaka. I'm with you. To me, I'd be playing him more minutes than just about any big man. But
yeah. I love when I unleash a take for Ryan. Yeah. Like he's just not prepared, and Ryan is just apoplectic.
I think free throws is where he needs to build the most, in my opinion. I mean, he's amazing on the boards. Yeah. He's amazing at drawing fouls, and then he goes and he hits 1 of 2 at best. I mean, the Texas A&M game was a little different. He legitimately shot very well from the free throw line there. the month of February, he is not. He's shooting maybe 45% from the line.
Ethan, out the window. We're Texas A&M on. That's my sample size. Texas A&M on, and that's all I'm doing.
Go Texas.
I would say, going back to your more general point, I wouldn't be completely cutting Olivier out of the rotation. I would what's the word I'm looking for? Room for error, or he's getting less benefited now, I think. But I'm not completely cutting him out. I mean, I'm still giving him opportunities early in the game, and if he plays poorly, then maybe his minutes are severely getting cut down. I definitely think he should see a minute reduction though. And
would you start him? He can't start anymore when they're healthy. Like, he can't.
Who cares about who starts?
Well, it cares about how you start these games, because Tennessee has done this thing where they'll dig themselves a hole, man. Like they did against Kentucky. They got up to a good start against A&M, but like they will put themselves in a hole. And when you start off with Jonas and Kamwa and whoever, like Maychak, it's like you have 3 non-shooters here to start the game, and then there's just not a lot of margin for error if the defense isn't completely up for the test out of the gate. Like, it's just, I don't think you can do it.
I mean, I agree with that from the standpoint of with Maychak in the starting lineup. But once you get Julian or Josiah back, to me, I'm not just saying like this. My thing, like the Kentucky game, the first half was horrific. So it's not like you just dug yourself a hole and you played well after the first 5 minutes and you couldn't come back from it. You dug yourself a hole by being incompetent for the first 18 minutes of the game. Yeah. So, but I do see your point, and I just don't really get hung up on the starter stuff as much because, I mean, we saw for half the season Tennessee start a lineup that was essentially as good, maybe even a little bit of worse than their second team was, and they played well when they were doing that. So in the end, didn't kill them. But yeah, I'd agree with that. And the thing about Josiah and Julian, it's just not having both of them. It compounds the issue of not having one of them so much worse because you just can't do so many things. And I would probably agree with Ethan that I would rather have Julian Phillips back. Josiah, I think his ceiling of what he does for Tennessee is higher when he shoots the ball well. But when he shoots the ball, I think the numbers were like 2 of 25 in his last 5 games from 3. Certainly rather have Julian Phillips there. And I think that's probably the most frustrating thing about Julian Phillips' injury and the timing of it is that not that it necessarily felt like he was turning a corner, but figuring some things out. And he needs to be one of those answers when shots aren't falling. And I feel like him missing this, what's going on 2 weeks now, it makes that really unlikely that he is going to really turn a corner and kind of have like a Kennedy type turn like he had last season by the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. It's just, we'll see. Last thing though on Tennessee basketball, what do you look, Ethan, when you look at Zakai's fouling issues, do you think it's a Sakai thing? Do you think it's just the way he's officiated? Do you think it's just the coaching where he just feels like he has to press more so he doesn't get plucked? Is he just kind of doubting just his play as of late? Because I think you can make the case he's been awful in February. Like it's been pretty rough. There's a reason BJ Edwards has gotten some run in the month of February here for the Vols, and
because Josiah and Julian Phillips are
I don't know because of Zakai. I think it's also just I think Barnes would love if BJ was further along. I think BJ would we already saw Barnes with the quick plug on Sakai as a starter, right? Like if BJ was further along, I would not be the least bit surprised if he would have preferred to start at least BJ and Zakai back off the bench. If he trusted BJ more and he was further along as a true freshman. Like I 1000% believe that's the case. He's longer. I think he profiles better to I don't know. I could just see that being the case because I think he really does feel more comfortable with Zakai coming off the bench. And I still wonder if Zakai is just always going to be more comfortable coming off the bench, but I don't know. What do you make, Ethan, of the foul situation with Zakai?
I think you were kind of on the nose with the pressure thing. I mean, he's being forced to play 36, 40 minutes a game. And that's just a lot on anybody, not to mention a sophomore point guard, which is, the most important position definitely in college basketball at this point, I'd say. My next point would be that you need right about now, this entire stretch of February is the proof, when we were talking like 4 months ago about desperately needing Yuri Collins on this team. Like you desperately need a guy that can relieve Zakai. Not necessarily not necessarily off the bench. I feel like just to start the game, just someone to give him a break. I mean for example, the Missouri game when he fouled out, that's a very underrated part of why Tennessee lost that game. And I feel like it's just exhaustion at that point. I mean, not necessarily why he fouled him because he was exhausted. Just, I mean, he's got everything on him. He's had everything on him for the past while now. It's him and Santi as far as guards go that are able to really take up the ball and really get things going. I feel like a little bit of Tyreek Key's confidence being down, it kind of helps to it as well because he's not really able to, I mean, he had that one game a couple weeks ago, and otherwise he's been kind of radio silent. So if you have guys like that aren't really helping him out that much, if he feels, that Barnes is pushing him, if he feels like he has to do too much with the offense, it's just, I mean, we got to remember these guys are 20 years old. These guys are, in big pressure situations, playing 36, 40 minutes a game. It's going to wear on you eventually. I think that has something to do with it, especially considering the past month, Zakai has not been the same Zakai as he was at the beginning of the season. I mean, I'd say full season Zakai is a top 5 point guard in the SEC. Right now, month of February, I don't think he is. Not how he's been playing lately in the past month.
No. Ryan, true or false? Cam Seldon has the best freshman season of anyone in the 2023 Tennessee Volunteer class.
False.
Okay.
Not to me, there's not like an obvious person I'm saying is going to have a better season, but if you're going to give me him against the field, to me, it's a no doubter. And Seldon's not. I don't see him as the definitive most ready player to play in this class. I don't see him as the guy that has the quickest path to playing time, even to be honest with you. So I would probably even go Nathan Leacock over him, to be honest. Look on the defensive side of the ball. I think we talked about last week, one of those linebackers, probably most likely Arian Carter is going to have a great chance to factor. Look at corner, maybe Jordan Matthews, to me, is going to have, if he can come in and impress, going to have a chance to play. And then, not that I think he's going to be an every down starter, but I think Caleb Herring as well will probably get some opportunities in pass rush situations.
Interesting. Ethan, what do you think?
I agree with pretty much everything Ryan just said. I was going to especially hit home the one of Jeremiah Taylor, Jalen Smith, Arian Carter. I feel like just because you got that BYU transfer and like he said, we talked about it a little bit last week. You got Aaron Beasley, BYU transfer, and then it's probably going to be one of those three coming up in the back.
Well, Elijah Herring, I think, will play too. I think there's Elijah Herring might start, right?
Fair,
I don't think that's out of the question.
I do think, like Ryan said, they have a considerably better path to play. Just of the three of them, it's just who has the best spring camp, who impresses, who impresses the coaching staff the most. I think I would also say that Leacock probably has more of a run over Seldon right now. I think Seldon has more hype on social media, just from, people seeing his highlight tapes and people seeing his writing and stuff like that. But, what you hear coming out of camp is that Leacock is doing very well. And I think you'll get at least one freshman wide receiver getting some major run. And I would also say that'd be Leacock.
I just worry because Heupel he loves the 3 wide out sets and he only plays just those guys if he can get away. It's just, I don't know. I think Laycock's path is injury, right? I think if Laycock has a big freshman year, it's because Tennessee got ravaged by injuries in the wide receiver front. But for me, I think 1A, I think Cam Seldon's the dark horse. If I had to pick one wild card, just because of the way folks have talked about him and him having the Debo, Cordero Patterson type vibe coming in and being a running back out of the gate here. I think there's a quicker path for the running back spot. And we also saw Dylan Sampson did play a little bit this past year, especially when he picked up protection after the mess up and miscue against LSU, that they trusted him a little bit more. I think they like rotating. You'll get he might get a full series in some of these games where it's just from some, and if he impresses and he shows, which I think what will be unique about him is he is a true dual threat in the backfield, where it's because he played receiver, because he's just a Swiss Army guy that if he knows the playbook and they trust him, putting him on the field is just such a mismatch for opposing defenses because he can go both ways. You can line him up inside, you can line him up outside. You don't know if he's going to be getting a RPO handoff. You don't know if he's going to be going out in the flats, because you just have to prepare for him. I think he's going to be a really, really fascinating guy. And I also think the number 2 for me is Ethan Davis. I think Ethan Davis was a really good player at Collins Hill back in my home state. And I just think because it's so thin at the tight end spot that I think if Ethan's good, especially just catching the ball, like I think he could be a red zone guy. They might utilize early. I would not be surprised if Ethan Davis has a stronger impact on this Tennessee team as a freshman than many people are anticipating, because I just think the opportunities might be, they're just so thin, and the idea that McAllen and Jacob Warren are just going to be totally healthy and ready to go week in, week out all year. I have my doubts, and I think Ethan is at the very least a really good receiver, and I think that's just going to be valuable come red zone time for the Vols. I think that's fair, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that was I was going through it. I was honestly a mission on my part because, I mean, you said it best. There's opportunity there. I mean, at worst, he's going to be the third guy. I mean,
yeah,
no, like I don't see who else is going to be the third guy, and certainly he has the highest ceiling of anyone in that room. And I have a hard time seeing anyone supplanting Jacob Warren as the starter necessarily, but they've rotated there a ton, and you're right. He certainly has the potential to be the best pass catcher, and obviously is going to be in a big role moving forward in his career.
Yeah, but we'll see. We'll see what ultimately happens on that front. We got time for one more here. McElroy, or no, let's do this. Which Heupel assistant has the most pressure on him this fall? A lot of raises handed out this week for this staff. Heupel obviously gets a big extension this offseason. Who do you think, Ethan, has the most pressure on him to succeed both on the field and off the field? Because that's what I think some people might miss, is I think it's not just on the field results. It's recruiting results and it's on the field results. Who do you think is under the most pressure to succeed following these raises this year?
Well, I'd say Willie Martinez has at least addressed the defensive back concerns in recruiting, at least. I mean, you got Jordan Matthews, you got a bunch of talent coming in for cornerback. It's just you got to translate it to the field, because I'd say a combination of Willie Martinez as a parent to, or Tim Banks as a parent to Willie Martinez. I mean, just defensively, that's where the pressure is going to come from, because the offense, even without Endon Hooker, even with all the people they lost, the offense is at the very least going to be steady. I mean, you can pretty much just bet the farm on that. Defensively, that's going to be the question mark. It has been for the entirety of the Josh Heupel era so far. It's just you got to get a defense out there that can legitimately give the offense a chance against these really, really good teams, or when the offense isn't quite going. You can't have more South Carolina, I guess, is what I'm saying. And so if you do have another South Carolina, if you have a couple South Carolinas, people are going to start wondering, hey, I think there might be a legitimate issue. Some Vol fans said that after the South Carolina game last year. Some of them said that, hey, defensively, this team's never going to get anything done. So, I mean, that's where the most pressure comes from, in my opinion.
Ryan, do you agree that it's Willie, or do you have another name in mind?
I would agree that it's Willie. Like, that's my first thought. But to me, it's pretty similar between him and Brian Jean-Marie.
Yeah.
Or heck, honestly, now those two guys, I think from an on the field standpoint, and I think part of me thinks Jean-Marie, just go into my classic Southern white guy accent, butchering the pronunciation of his last name. Because we talked about it last week, it feels like the linebacker room is more ready from a talent standpoint to take a jump. Whereas the defensive back room, it still feels like it's a year away.
Mm-hmm.
You would hope it would be improved from last year because of how bad it was last year. But it still feels like, and he has recruited well. I think he's probably going to get the benefit of the doubt. And there's probably nothing that's going to happen this year that's going to get him fired. Another name I would throw out there, and this is less on-field related, would be Jerry Mack. Tennessee just, to me, needs to. You mentioned earlier, offensive line's like the one spot you worry about recruiting. But to me, on the offensive line, it's really, and I completely agree with that. That's number one. And to me, it's on the offensive tackle spot specifically. Look, it's hard to project recruiting services. It's hard to project offensive linemen, especially interior offensive linemen. So you can get a lot of good players in the interior offensive line who are highly rated. But you're right. The elite offensive tackles are usually pretty elite at the college level. But I don't worry about Glenn Ellerby because he's great friends with Josh Heupel, and he's been with him every step of his coach career. It just doesn't feel like there's any pressure on him at this point. Now, once lack of recruiting success starts to hurt on the field, then some tough conversations have to be made. I just don't see that happening this year. So I go Jerry Mack. They haven't recruited running back particularly well. Some of that has been obviously the offense has been more passing focused. And even though it is balanced, I think this year will probably help because they'll run the ball a lot more. And at least last year in the 2023 cycle, I can't remember as much going back to 2022, but it was a weak running back cycle. So you have a little bit of benefit of the doubt for those types of things. This year, I think some of those things he gets the benefit of doubt for are gone. So I think that it ups a little bit of pressure there. They need to recruit better at that spot. And I think those guys on the defensive side of the ball, I think, have more reason to get the benefit of the doubt than Jerry Mack does. So that would kind of be a guy I watch.
Interesting. Yeah, those are two good ones. I would also just say, like, I don't think he's in danger, but I think Joey Halsey is going to be under a microscope because they didn't go outside. Yeah. They just promoted from within. Obviously, like Alex Golish we'll just see if there's a drop off there and more on his plate as OC. Like, does he call plays? Does Heupel increase his load? Like, do they need to hire another QB coach along with Halsey? Do they just need to kind of beef that staff back up around him, just putting too much on his plate? Like, that's something to, I think, also keep in mind because it's a big jump for him. And unfairly or fairly, he's going to be a target if Tennessee's offense takes a step back. So like, oh, well, no Golish. We promoted from within with Halsey. Like, he, I think, will actually be the target there, whether or not that's fair or not. Well, there you go. Ryan, what do you want to plug here as we wrap up here tonight? We got the story over on Rocky Top Insider that everyone should go check out. We've got Rick Butler watermarking his Rocky Top Insider dope photos, which is good to see. That one with I saw it. I was like, smart move, man, because people are going to do it. Tennessee fans are going to do it. He's got the watermark because he takes good photos, man. There was a good one for Tennessee baseball this week. But what do you want to plug here?
Yeah, I mean, y'all have done a great job of plugging the Memphis story for me, so I appreciate that. Oral history, 15-year anniversary. Bruce Pearl, Tony Jones, Jason Shea, Chris Lofton. I think ended up being 11 people kind of involved in that game that discussed it, and that was a lot of fun to do. So check that out. And then, we'll have coverage on basketball this weekend. Baseball, I'm glad you plugged it. Rick got a bunch of really good pictures from the Alabama and A&M game. He's planning on taking a lot more this year. And, we learn from our errors over at Rocky Top Insider. We've got the watermark down now, and not gonna let anybody steal the stuff. So
I like it.
Should be tons of good stuff on both ends.
Are you going to the game today?
Yep,
I'll be there today
this weekend. So
right.
Okay,
I'm going.
What do they have today?
Dayton.
Interesting.
No run rule. Letting people know. No run rule this weekend, which could be somewhat of an issue.
But there is a pool holes. There is a pool holes in the middle of the lineup, so they might not need a run rule. He might be mashing in the middle of the lineup. I think he's a distant relative or something of Albert. They are somehow related.
That is my understanding.
Yeah. Ethan, what about you and the good folks over there on Saturday Down South? I know Connor O'Gara had Alex Golish, I think, on the Saturday Down South pod today, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, it was either today or I don't know. I saw the announcement the other day, and that especially. But just we're in the process of transitioning still. Going to college baseball, going on to college basketball. Obviously, March Madness coming up, conference tournaments coming up. Have all things SEC, Big Ten, ACC, and Pac-12 covered on all 4 of our sites.
There you go. Ryan, Ethan, always a pleasure, and I will talk to y'all next week.